This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability and a generous investment by Julianne Wrigley.
But let us talk about when America was great. I have a totally different idea than that other guy. You know, my feeling is when America was great was when there were 8,000 varieties of corn. You know, that's when America was great. And all of that corn, a lot of that corn, the seed selection was by women. Because women are really good at that because we know like how it is when you're processing it and how it cooks and how it keeps, right? So that was like before Monsanto, right? That was like nobody in a white coat. You know, that was like, and a lot of the world's agriculture is practiced like that. You know, that's when America was great, when we had 8,000 varieties of corn. America was great when we had 250 species of grass in the northern plains. Tremendous biodiversity, and with it 50 million buffalo. That's when America was great. America was great when you had maple syrup and wild rice throughout our territory. And America was great when you could drink the water from our rivers. And I really liked what Harlan Bearhand said today. He was talking about how that you used to be able to go take your horses and you could dig down and the spring would fill. The water would fill from the spring because it was close to the surface. And you can no longer do that here. You can no longer do that in many places. But where I live, you can still drink the water from a lake. That's where I live. I live in a place where if you go into the boundary waters, you can still drink the water from a lake. And the springs on our reservation, you can still drink from. They are good springs. I live in a place where we have so much wild rice that we can feed our people, and we still have fish. And we have worked very hard to fight for that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story of my past 4 years. You guys hung out with me for a few minutes. I'm like, basically, I'd like to be a writer and a gardener and hang out with my horses, and now I want to make goat cheese. That's like my bucket list, right? Like that's my idea of what I should do, you know, but I've spent a lot of time fighting stupid projects. A lot of my life is spent doing that. And you know, I'm an economist by training. And as I look out there in the economic choices that we face in the world, there's some really dumb decisions that are made. And they continue to be made by people who make dumb decisions. But those dumb decisions include a set of oil pipelines. And so what's happened is that in the past 15 years, they've come up with this mythology of American self-sufficiency. And instead of buying oil from the country that has the largest oil reserves in the world, which is Venezuela, not Saudi Arabia, it's Venezuela. We retooled the whole energy infrastructure in this country to get oil from places it's really hard to get oil from. And we've entered this era which is known as extreme extraction. And what it means when you're kind of at the bottom of the barrel is that you have to do things like drill 20,000 feet under the ocean, right, to get oil. That's not like gushing oil wells in Oklahoma anymore. That's like scary stuff. And it works out until that deep water horizon, right? Then you got to do stuff like frack. Frack everything, 602 chemicals, bust up the bedrock of Mother Earth, that stuff, right? And then you do stuff like the tar sands. So about 4 years ago, the Enbridge company announced a pipeline project that would cut through, as you see, the northeast corner of my reservation. And that pipeline project was called the Sandpiper. And the Sandpiper was a fracked oil pipeline of 640,000 barrels a day that was to come from the fracking fields of North Dakota. And we didn't know anything about it, you know, and I was like, dang, you know, I was like, kind of blindsided me. And I said, I'm gonna study up. So I studied up. I spent a lot of time educating my own people, my own community, my tribal governments in the region, because it would affect a lot of us. And plus we have these extraterritorial treaty rights, which is that we harvest throughout that territory. And so we spent a lot of time, and then I spent a lot of time getting the Norwegians mad. Because who lives in the North Country is a lot of Scandinavians. And I was like, y'all, check this out, you know? And so over 4 years, we built this multiracial alliance, you know, and we went to every hearing. We challenged them. I challenged Enbridge to many debates. They never took me up, you know, but we intervened in every process. We, you know, took over the media. We, you know, because we have the moral high ground. It's an oil company that wants to, you know, risk us for its profits. We don't produce oil, we're just the conduit. And we already had this set of pipelines that were going through our territory that none of us knew much about. So we fought them for 4 years. About a year and a half ago, Friends of the Headwaters filed a lawsuit, some non-Indian people, saying that the state should do an environmental impact statement on that. The state didn't want to, appealed the court case, and then finally the court ruled, the Minnesota Court of Appeals ruled that they had to do an environmental impact statement. At this point, 4 years in, Enbridge's plans were kind of disheveled, a little bit problematic. I understand we cost them $600 million, and and at the same time, I want to say we did this, but we also did a lot of ceremonies. And that's why I really appreciated that prayer with the water, because we're water people. But we prayed, we had a lot of our ceremonies about this, and we rode our horses. I rode our horses against the current of the oil. We rode hundreds of miles on the proposed pipeline route. And one day after our last ceremonial and spiritual ride against the current of the oil last year, one day after, on August 2nd, the Enbridge company announced that it was withdrawing all of its applications to go forward with that pipeline. And that was a big victory for our people. That was a big victory for our people. And so we felt good about it, and then the next day we find out that what they had done is purchased 28% of the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is the pipeline that would go through the Standing Rock Reservation. And so we had already known something about that pipeline, and my organization, Honor the Earth, had been out there starting in April working with the Sacred Stone Camp and working in the communities. So we said, well, if it's not good for us, it's not good for them either. So we followed them out there. We followed that company out there. And in buying 28% of that pipeline, we felt that they bought quite a bit of the liability. And so early on, I approached the Enbridge company and I said, you want to do business with Indian people. They, in our story, they tried really hard to talk to us, Enbridge did. And so they had these guys, I know that they have them down here, they had these guys called the tribal relations specialists that they sent to talk to all the tribes, the tribal relations specialists. We refer to them as the Indian whisperers, right? And they had no game. They got nowhere, And then, but then they gave me this other person to talk to called the Indian listener. That's how we referred to him. So I said, I was in a meeting with the Indian listener. I said, I said to them, you guys moved to North Dakota. You didn't even tell us. I said, I feel like you dumped me. You know what I'm saying? For 4 years, they told us it was an essential route, that they had to do it this way. There was no other way to do it. There was no other way to go around us. And then one day, dumped. Went to North Dakota. I said, how's that working out for you? They said, there's a lot of Indians out there. I said, there's more coming. There's more coming.
This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability for educational and non-commercial use only.